That brings me to one of my major problems with Mouse PI for Hire. Look, I hate to be that guy who brings up ludonarrative dissonance in a video game review in the year of our Lord 2026, and if you're rolling your eyes right now, I can't blame you, but
This review is terrible. It's contradictory, it's out of touch, and the verdict isn't driven by any real examination of the game's systems, it's driven by a pretentious reviewer who walked in expecting something the game was never trying to be, and then penalized it for not being that thing. And it's all our fault. I know that's a weird thing to say, but stay with me. Because the thing that made this review go viral, the Reddit threads, the reaction videos, the Discord screenshots, none of that hurt the people who publish it. All of it helped them. We all saw this, we all called it out, and that's exactly why this review is a massive success for the company that made it. So let's actually talk about what happened here. Welcome back to the Black Market, I'm your host Cobalt. Mouse PI for Hire is a hand-drawn noir boomer shooter. Gorgeous rubber hose animation, a detective framing that works, and a combat loop that does exactly what boomer shooters are supposed to do. Lock you in arenas and make you clear the room before you move on. That's the genre. That's been the genre since Doom. IGN gave it a 6 out of 10. Among the listed reasons, too many cheese jokes, in a game about a mouse living in a world of mice, the arena combat, and too much violence. Some of the same things that are defining features of the entire genre. He calls it a competent boomer shooter and then docks it for being a boomer shooter. That's not a review. That's someone buying a can of beans and complaining that there isn't enough salad in their can of beans. Yeah, here's where I think this actually comes from. And it's more interesting than just the reviewer is bad, I promise. Major outlets have spent the last decade trying to reposition themselves as serious cultural criticism. They don't want to be enthusiast press, the people who understand frame pacing and hitbox feedback and why boomer shooters arena design actually matters. No. They want to be the gaming equivalent to the New York Times arts section, taken seriously, in the same room as film critics and literary reviewers. And on paper that sounds reasonable, games are art. Deep analysis is good. But in practice, what that shift produces is a review ecosystem where vibe gets weighed over mechanics, narrative impression over system design, and whether a game feels meaningful over whether it actually executes its genre craft at a high level. Those things sound sophisticated in a review. They also happen to require much less genre knowledge to write. Explaining why Mouse PI's arena combat is well designed requires you to know what good arena combat looks like across 32 years of boomer shooters. Saying that cheese jokes felt overdone requires nothing but a personal preference. And one of those is harder to write. And under deadline pressure of a major outlet, the easier path gets taken constantly. The Mouse PI review isn't a mystery. It's what happens when someone who doesn't know the genre covers a game and reaches for cultural commentary as a substitute for mechanical understanding. Here's the thing though, this isn't new. IGN has been doing this for a long time, and the gaming community has a whole graveyard of examples. In 2014, IGN gave Alien Isolation a 5.9. The complaint? And I want you to actually hear what I'm saying. The complaint was that the alien was too hard to avoid. The reviewer played on hard difficulty, the difficulty the game itself recommends you to play, and then deducted points because the survivor horror game where the apex predator of science fiction hunts you was too frightening and punishing. IGN's own outlet eventually published a piece essentially walking back the review a decade later, which tells you everything you need to know about how that score aged. Same year, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. IGN gave it a 7.8 and listed too much water as one of the primary criticisms in a game set in Hoenn, a region literally defined by its ocean. Now look, I cover monster tamers on the channel, and I'm probably one of the last people who should be dismissing a complaint about Pokemon design. And honestly, the underlying point isn't entirely wrong. Hoenn has a lot of water routes and traversal can get tedious. Going along with that, there's a disproportionate amount of water-type Pokemon in Gen 3, probably as a result of the surrounding, water. That's a real thing. But the way it was written, as a bullet point that read like a confused complaint rather than a mechanical critique, is what made it a meme that the official Pokemon Company account still is using to roast IGN over 10 years later. To be fair, too much water was what was put in the IGN review summary, not the review itself. The reviewer had a completely valid criticism, and either whoever posted it or the editor or whatever who made the summary ultimately turned what actually was a decent review into a meme. It's not that the observation was invalid, it's that the review didn't have the genre fluency to actually articulate it. And that's the same problem we're seeing here with Mouse PI. The pattern isn't that IGN occasionally misses, The pattern is that they consistently penalize games for being exactly what they were designed to be when the reviewer doesn't have the genre background to recognize good execution when they see it. And it keeps happening. And we keep being surprised. And the worst part is, we keep clicking. But here's where the individual bad review becomes something bigger. Because when you look at broader games media landscape, it's not just IGN, but the whole ecosystem of major outlets. They all kind of feel the same, similar scores, similar framing, similar language. You can open 4 different sites covering the same game and it reads like they're all pulling from the same template. That's not a coincidence. IGN Entertainment purchased Gamer Network's digital brands Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, and VG 24/7 in 2024. Fandom owns GameSpot, Metacritic, and GameFAQs. Valnet picked up Polygon in 2025 and dropped it into a stable that already included Games Rant and Screen Rant. A handful of holding companies own most of what you read. They're not competing outlets trying to beat each other to the most accurate review. They're siblings sharing an ecosystem, all optimizing towards the same metrics, all applying roughly the same editorial posture. The reason games coverage feels homogenous isn't because all these critics independently arrived at the same style. It's because consolidation flattened what used to be a genuinely diverse media landscape into a few corporate entities wearing different brand names. And within that structure, the incentive to develop real genre expertise, to be the outlet that actually knows boomer shooters or monster tamers or tactics RPGs at a deep level, basically doesn't exist. Because depth doesn't scale. Templates do. So with all of that as context, here's why none of our anger about it matters to them. A solid, accurate review of Mouse PI for Hire gets moderate views and then disappears. It helps the person make a purchase decision. That's the full lifespan of a useful review. Quiet, functional, forgotten in a week. Maybe it's brought back later when someone is checking up on the game when it's on sale, or just discovered that genre of gaming and heard that this might be a good one. Other than that, that's when it's over. This review, it became a news event. Every forum post, reaction video, every hate click from someone who went to IGN specifically to confirm how bad it was, that's all engagement. It all registered as content performing well. The outrage is the product. They didn't accidentally stumble into controversy. The controversy is what that content is engineered to generate. And look, I have to be honest with you here because I think it matters. This video had to do the exact same thing I'm telling you to think twice about doing. I had to reference the IGN review. I had to talk about it, clip it, put it in front of you. In order to make this point, I had to participate in the same cycle I'm critiquing, and I'm aware of that. I made the call that the argument was worth making anyways. That understanding the mechanism is more valuable than staying clean of it. But I'm not going to pretend I'm standing outside of a system while I'm using it to make a video. That would make me exactly like what I'm criticizing. Every angry comment on IGN video, every share, every "you won't believe what they did now" post, it's a data point in their quarterly numbers that says the content works. We're not pressuring them to do better. We're funding the next one. And now so am I, to some degree. The difference is I'm hoping that you walk away thinking about this mechanism rather than just reloading the outrage. I'm not saying to stop being frustrated. The review is bad. But frustration aimed at IGN specifically accomplishes close to nothing for them and quite a bit for their analytics. When we engage with this stuff purely to point out how wrong it is, we are the fuel for the machine. That's not conspiracy, it's just what ad-supported outrage content does when it finds an audience that reliably shows up to be angry. The thing that actually shifts anything is where your attention goes after the anger fades. Because there are people covering games right now who do know what a boomer shooter is, who can tell you whether the arena design is well constructed or lazy, whether the difficulty curve is intentional, whether the game earns your time and money at a mechanical level. They just don't have the biggest marketing budget to spend or the most impressions in your feed. I've got a full breakdown of Board Like coming, and that video is going to be exactly the kind of analysis I'm talking about. Not vibe, not cultural framing, the actual systems. Evaluated honestly. And that's the standard I want to hold myself to and the channel to. I do reviews on this channel a lot, and I try my best to make sure that they are as unbiased as possible, and they focus on the mechanics, the actual systems, and are evaluating these games honestly. And I hope it's helpful to you all to see reviews like that. The only way that kind of coverage survives is if people reward it, not out of charity, but because it genuinely is more useful to them than a review that deducts points for cheese jokes. If you made it this far in the video, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to grow the channel right now and every little bit helps. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. I stream on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, so feel free to stop by and say hi. And as always guys, I'll be back later in another video. Peace out. One question actually. At what point did you realize reviews weren't being written for the people who actually play the games? There's usually a specific moment for most people. Drop it in the comments. I want to know whether it's always the same examples or whether everyone has their own. And a special thanks to all our members for supporting the channel. You guys are what allows me to keep making these videos and doing what I love, so thank you.